So, what if I told you that your personal reality, the one you feel and live every day, isn't as solid as you think it is? What if it's actually more like plastic? You know, malleable, flexible, and totally ready to be reshaped. Well, today, we're going to dive into the art of impromptu hypnosis, and we'll be using Anthony Jacquin's fantastic book, Reality is Plastic, to figure out how it all really works.
When you hear the word hypnosis, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Come on, be honest. For most of us, it's one of two things, right? Either it's some kind of mystical mind control, or it's just a really clever psychological trick. That's the core question we're going to unpack today.
Look, most of what we think we know about hypnosis comes straight from the movies or those old stage shows. We've all got these images burned into our brains, right? Swinging watches, people clucking like chickens, a complete and total loss of control. These ideas are so common, they basically feel like facts. But today, we're going to peel back the curtain and separate that fiction from the truly fascinating reality.
To really get hypnosis, we have to start by deconstructing its most famous concept, the trance. And to do that, we kind of have to go back in time and see how our understanding evolved from something, well, mystical to something much more scientific.
It all kicked off back in the 18th century with a guy named Franz Mesmer and his wild theory of animal magnetism. He believed there was this invisible life force he could control. But then, in the 19th century, James Braid came along and said, hold on a minute, it's not about invisible fluids, it's about the person's own mind. And that, right there, was the huge shift. We started moving away from magic and towards psychology.
But here's where modern science really pulls the rug out from under one of the biggest myths. For all the talk about people being in a trance, researchers have found zero consistent, reliable evidence for some kind of unique, measurable trance state. So, if the person isn't entering some special brain state, what in the world is actually happening? And that question brings us to the core mechanism. See, instead of entering a special state, hypnosis is all about bypassing a very specific part of your mind. Think of it like a mental gatekeeper.
The legendary hypnotist Dave Ellman gave us probably the most useful definition ever. He said, hypnosis is when the critical faculty is bypassed, which then allows for selective thinking to be established. Okay, great, but what do those two terms actually mean? So what is this critical faculty? The easiest way to think about it is as your internal skeptic. You know, it's that part of your conscious mind that's always analyzing, judging, and saying, hang on a second, that's not possible. It's the filter that decides what you accept as real and what you reject as nonsense.
The process then is actually pretty simple. First, you just bypass that critical gatekeeper. Ellman called this the entering wedge. Once that's done, you establish selective thinking. And this is where the mind just locks onto a single idea and accepts it completely, no questions asked. So for instance, if the hypnotist suggests your arm is getting lighter and lighter, that thought becomes the only reality your mind is focused on.
All right, so the mental gatekeeper is on a coffee break. What happens next? Well, from here on out, the entire experience is driven by one thing and one thing only, the power of suggestion. The physician Hippolyte Bernheim nailed it way back in the 19th century. He said, it is suggestion that rules hypnotism. And that's the key. Suggestion is the engine of the whole process. It's not just one piece of hypnosis. It is hypnosis. Modern psychology has a name for this: response expectancy. A researcher named Irving Kirsch showed that what we experience depends almost entirely on what we expect to experience. It's exactly why a sugar pill can work even when you know it's just a sugar pill. Your brain is so incredibly powerful that just expecting a result helps to create that result. The belief that something's going to happen becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So here's the crucial point, the real goal of suggestion. It's to create a feeling of involuntariness. The experience has to feel like it's happening to you, not like something you are consciously doing. Your arm isn't lifting because you're lifting it. It's lifting because, well, it just is. But this whole process doesn't just happen on its own. It needs one final, absolutely critical ingredient to make it all click: the hypnotist. You could have the most perfect script in the world, but Jacquin says it's pretty much useless without the right attitude from the artist. It's not about the words, it's about the confidence. It's not the fancy technique, it's the expectation behind it. A script is just a tool. The hypnotist has to be the artist who completely embodies that role. And this all comes down to a really powerful line from Anthony Jacquin's book, "It is not the words that do the hypnotizing, you do."
The hypnotist's own belief, their confidence, and their expectation. That's what ultimately convinces the other person's mind to accept the suggestions.
So what does all of this mean for us? I mean, why does any of this really matter? Well, the ultimate takeaway here is actually a pretty profound one about the nature of our own reality.
Hypnosis isn't really about mind control or magic spells. At its core, it's a powerful demonstration that what we perceive as this fixed, objective reality is actually just a highly malleable point of view, one that's constructed inside our own minds. It's the very same mechanism, by the way, that creates our limiting beliefs or locks in our bad habits. If you want to boil it all down to one simple, elegant idea, it's this. The hypnotist's job is to use belief, expectation, and suggestion to help someone shift their experience from a conscious doing to an automatic, involuntary happening.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty powerful thought to chew on. If hypnosis proves that our reality is fundamentally plastic, what parts of your reality could you choose to reshape?